You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, training, culture, all that good stuff, and how they intersect. I'm really excited to feature this guest. He's just on the opposite side of the state. That's Director of Training, Tony Anderman, who's with Spokane County. So, Tony, thanks so much for coming on, sir.
Yeah, nice to be here finally. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Shout out to Raven for connecting us. She has a list of law enforcement, police professionals that she puts like right at the top of the list. She brought your name up, man, quite a while ago.
Yeah, I think she actually told me when she did that. She was in a meeting with me. She goes, "Oh, by the way, you have to meet Eric." Okay.
Oh, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of an intro, a little crash course. We're going to get really deep. Um, I know you sent, as I was saying before the recording, like 5 prongs of training. And this was me prompting you on what comes to mind when you think about what modernized policing needs in the conversation training. But before we get to some of that, can you tell us a little bit about your background and yourself?
Sure, I started out in the corrections side of the field. Went from there to the Criminal Justice Training Commission for about 20 plus years. I held multiple positions in there. In fact, my last position before leaving, I was the assistant commander for BLEA here in Spokane for CJTC. During that time, though, Eric, I had an opportunity to work in DARPA. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration. Got to do some great stuff with Wazoo. In fact, 2 colleagues of mine who we're together on a grant with now, Dr. Brian Landy and Dr. Jonathan Winder. You should get a hold of those guys. Those guys are absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, 2 years with them, writing content. I was a lead researcher, lead writer on the content for social interaction for the military. However, it was law enforcement who helped build that for them, because there was a lot of things going on overseas when it came to social interaction in different cultures. So I got to work through that. Out of that whole process, we were able to bring with us a 40-hour tactical social interaction course, which, we teach individuals how to communicate better, more effectively with not only their peers, their leadership, but also with the community, talking about kinesics, biometrics, proxemics. How do you gain that trust within the first 30 seconds of contact? What does it take? And the reality of it, Eric, and even the research is out there, it's that genuine smile, right? In most cases, is if you provide that genuine smile, you'll get that social interaction and you'll start connecting. I've taught it, down in Florida, California, here, all over the place. And that's the number one thing is all the students will tell you, if we just have that genuine smile, we'll have that trust immediately within that first 30 seconds. When I say always, I would say about 80% of the time, not 100%.
Yeah.
And then, of course, from there, I got hired on by former Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Now I work with the Sheriff John Knowles and his exec team, and been doing some good things here over the last 10 years.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. Thanks for that crash course. And yes, we will have to connect with the good doctors when we get off the recording. That sounds fascinating, and I love how you even did this like probably the most brief, concise yet impactful introduction to the tactical social interaction program and training. Simply starting with a smile, like relaying
Yes.
intent, and it really underlines how sometimes we can really complicate things. And I love the deep dive. I love that it's data backed, and I love that this is a conversation and specific concrete training. But just think about like how often you can relay that intent and that energy from a simple interaction, even outside of the uniform. And I think you'd be hard pressed to hear a lot of police departments across the nation, let's just say a number of years ago, training the power of a smile.
It's so true, Eric. And, I'm not talking about the high risk stops. We're not going there. We're just talking about that every day that we can put money in the bank or in the savings
Mhm.
when great deputies from our department or from officers from your department can walk up to somebody, just provide that smile and have that interaction. One a good example of that, we trained a set of individuals out of Fort Lewis, and a couple of them were one of those investigators that do deep investigations, and they responded to a scene, and the first thing the individual said is, "I want to talk to that individual," pointed right at one of the students. And after it was all said and done, they asked, "Why did you want to, was he a part of it? What's going on?" No, he was smiling with the other officers, and I wanted to, see that
Mm,
smile with me, sitting down. And they sat down on a curb. They have a picture of this, and he sat there for about 45 minutes gathering all the intel they needed for that. And it started out with a smile with that individual. So yes, it works, and sometimes, most people can tell a really poor smile. They know it's fake, right?
mhm.
And they know it's genuine. Of course, all the micro expressions in the face, and you go to different cultures, I'm sure you have as well, when even when you can't speak the language, they can see that smile or they can see that anger or that frustration. So the simplicity of just take a deep breath, watch what's in front of you. And if you have the time, obviously, to gain that trust, make it happen.
Yeah, I like that, and it makes me think of stories I've shared about early officer years and trying to have this. I mean, I already have kind of the RBF, the resting bro face. I recognize that about myself and emotional intelligence. You need that self-awareness to be effective in communication. So, just even one of the very few things that positively that came out of the COVID era was we're wearing masks and people learn they have to smile with their eyes, right? And so you kind of bring up your brow a little bit and your ears come back and it shows this
Yep.
openness. And even if people feel like it might be goofy to smile, sure, a lot of context on the street, perhaps there's conflict going on. And as you pointed out, like, yeah, we're not talking about the high risk, but it is to say that there's something we can do with our body language, with our facial expressions to signal, hey, I'm here to work with you. Hey, I'm here to
Yes.
help, rather than,
Yes.
what my tendency was, aware and unaware, was to furrow my brow, get really serious and be like, hey, I gotta show this confidence. Well, it's almost like those that practice, whether they practice devoutly in fitness and or martial arts, like the people that are the most confident don't have to seem angry. They just know
Right.
they can handle it. So they bring this kind of the swagger to it anyway.
And most of the effective deputies and officers that I get to work with every day, that's who they are. They're
Yeah.
generally good people, and when the community sees that genuine side of them, even under the areas when there's a cognitive load or they have to use force or whatever it may be, it's those individuals that put the money in the bank for the department and the community because they're genuine people. They truly care about what's in front of them. And as you know, you only have so much time to spend with those individuals before you have to go to the next call. But
Hmm.
those individuals who are successful at it close that conversation down with the genuine calling them by their name, last name, first name, whatever it may be. If it's feasible, they shake their hand, or give them a high five or a fist bump. That creates what we're learning through the research. That creates a lot of, I guess, funding in the bank, if you will, for
Yeah.
that individual deputy. And we know now it's not really the deputy's face that they recognize. They now recognize the uniform. So it's not the individual that they gain respect for, it's the uniform that they start gaining respect
Mm.
for. So,
Yeah, it's that representation.
yep.
And I mean, I love how we're kicking this off because a lot of the intention of the conversation today was to be talking about culture change and elevation through meaningful training. And you gave a great example right there. You're literally training people to be open and to relay that smile and recognize that energy they bring to a conversation or an interaction, and how that allowance of connecting with a human does actually translate to the uniform. And so, with that, all that, perhaps we start with like what makes great training.
I should ask you that actually, coming from your side and your specialty. I'm gonna give you 5 points on this one, and we can talk about one or two of them. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna go to my notes here. Create training. Great training is a performance first. It produces repeatable job relevant behavior under circumstances under a cognitive load. Right. The second one is if we can't measure the validity, we can't claim it's taught, right? And that's one thing that most agencies, their intent is so good. They want to provide the best training, but when you sit down with individuals and you have a nice warm scotch with them and the conversation goes in, how do you measure your training? What's that look like? A lot of them don't have that time to measure. And if it is, it's a very short measurement, right? Meaning it's that level one. How was the climate? Did we meet the objectives? Did we offend anybody? That type of evaluation. They don't go deeper into that level three evaluation of behavior change. The third one point is if we can't score reliability, we can't defend it or improve upon it. What that means is the consistency of the behavior, and that's where the level three evaluation comes in, Eric. Is I'll have to bring up Jonathan Winder's name and also Brian Landy's name with that research project. It's $1 million project. Polis Solutions is the company that they oversee, and also National Police Institute is helping as well. We were able to bring on a curriculum writer to rewrite all of our in-service training, and our number one goal to use the software is how do we actually measure if it's working out on the street? And if it's not working, what is that gap? Can we come back to in-service, correct
Mhm.
that gap, and start narrowing down on that behavior that's not working? So validity and reliability is critical that we're just now getting into. If I didn't have the software, and if it works, if I didn't have the software, it would probably cost maybe $300,000-400,000 from university to come in and do a level three evaluation because they're evaluating the supervisor, the deputy, the community, and then it takes time to do that. We're
Yeah.
hoping that through this software partnership, we'll be able to get that closer. Number four, learn best when they understand why it matters. You know this as well as I do. If you got somebody in front of you and they're teaching and they're not telling you why this matters, you're going to get a bunch of phones or, and back in the day, newspapers in front of you
Mm.
going, yeah, what's going on in front of me, right? And then the last one, we don't rise to the occasion. It's in critical incidents, we default to our training. That tells you that we have to provide that training that's meaningful, that's valid and reliable, that's defensible, that our deputies and officers can go back and trust in what we gave them and what they learned. And again, learning doesn't occur until behavior changes. So the idea is for them to call me up or call one of the training staff up or tell their supervisor, going, hey, we just use that technique. Even if it's 1 in 200 deputies, we use that technique. That's what we're doing. Making it more emotional connected is critical as well.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, you've given us a lot, and I've taken some notes and the notes you sent prior. And so, entering this conversation, maybe we'll just start right there. The why. And I appreciate there's so many leaders across industries that recognize that the power of relaying why is not simply a younger generation thing. It
No.
cements buy-in, it cements learning, and you made that clear distinction. What do you mean when you talk about the emotional component when it comes into that?
We learned through DARPA that as soon as you get the individual emotionally connected to the learning, they're going to retain that information longer. A good example is this. I'm sure you remembered your first car accident or your first fight like it was yesterday. You remember the nuances, the smell,
Yeah.
the humidity, the dry air, the cold air, whatever that is. If we can bring that emotional attachment into the classroom, make sure we answer that why, it's critical to them as the learner, the adult learner. They're going to retain that information longer. More importantly, they're going to walk away talking about it with their peers, with their supervisors. And that's what you want to happen. Use it and talk about it. And if they don't talk about it when they leave, or if they do and it's a negative thing, you can't please all learners, right? But you can do the best you can to get them to use it or talk about it. when they leave.
Yeah, it makes me recognize the power of story. I mean, that's not my unique take, but
Yes.
a lot of times there's that right balance. I already feel like the old timer being, approaching 20 years. I think I'm on number 19 now. But when I go into roll call and sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to share this story in context to what we're talking about. And sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, don't make it too long because we all remember that commander archetype or that lieutenant that would walk in and everyone would be like, okay, we're going to be here another 20 minutes. So try not to make it about me, but trying to say, hey, like this is the context. These are my mistakes. These are some lessons learned. I wish I knew this earlier. And I think that's the energy of so many mentors and coaches and leaders out there, which is just, hey, please don't learn from my error. Excuse me. Please learn from my error, not your own.
Sure. Yeah, before they get to it. And it's great that you said that. My son's is a brand new Las Vegas PD officer. And, he was telling me his stories while he was in the car. And when you're talking about the power of stories and don't do what I've done, one of his best FTOs, that's exactly what he remembers is, yes, you did that, but don't do what I've done in the past with this. And he talks about it all the time. As a brand new officer down in Las Vegas. He remembers those stories. So yes, the power of storytelling is critical, Eric, and how to bring in the why to your troops
Mm,
is to tie those two together.
yeah. And I think that there could be an intersection of the cognitive load that you started with earlier. Can you explain a little bit more about that in the context of is that just recognizing how much the human brain or the individual can actually take on rather than are they trying to drink through the fire hose and they're not picking up most of the stuff you're throwing at them?
Cognitive loads, stress inoculation, right? How often do we train our people how to administer it through training, not on the street,
Hmm.
through training that cognitive load? Have we taught our people well enough that you just don't throw somebody into a scenario with this high cognitive load with something that we're trying to see through some sort of a metrics or measurement, right? You want to try to take them through that process, start them slow, start them at a low level of that cognitive load. And hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying no cognitive level or no stress, but build them up over a 3 or 5 scenario period until they're able to make good decisions, critical thinking and problem solving skills through that process. So to make that short is, for example, in the academy, you remember the academy, 20 years of that. We all want to be this drill instructor type instructor or trainer at the academy. The reality is that's all good and fine. I'm not saying that's bad, but do we train our people well enough to get into that individual's sphere of influence or that space and get into their face? That's the key. And do we understand psychologically what we're doing and why, what our desired outcome is? So stress inoculation and also cognitive load, if done correctly, you're going to have some great training. You're going to have some great officers and deputies going outside of that training classroom, that traditional classroom or scenario, doing great things. But as soon as you come in strong and you hit them hard, and people will argue, wait a minute, that's what they get in the field. You're right, but this is training. We're trying to take that training and have it stick longer for them to use it under those immediate conditions in the field versus hit them hard. Yeah, they kind of learned something they probably didn't, or we take it slowly through the process.
Yeah, yeah. You can see how historically there's that not so fine line between too much overload and then just kind of like, yeah, I suffered that too. And it almost becomes like a hazing, like, oh yeah, like you just got thrown into this mix. It makes me think of a concept of training wheels. Like, do we just send a kid downhill with no pads on, no training wheels, because the harder they get hit, the more they'll recognize the need to stay up. And like, I think most people would say probably not. That's probably not helpful to the goal. And the other main thing that you talked about was the specificity of what you're evaluating. Have you identified that specific thing, that clear thing that you're trying to achieve, and then you can measure it and you kind of give us a sneak peek to that conversation too. We often talk about service and identity beyond the badge. Valor Technical Cleaning is a veteran-owned, nationwide biohazard remediation company hiring active and retired officers for business development roles. With Valor, you can build relationships with local agencies and continue to foster care for the community following tragedy. Continue serving, just in a new way. Visit valortechnicalcleaning.com and click Careers. Are you looking for help with your rest and recovery, wanting to optimize your sleep and prime performance? Well, New Calm is built on neuroscience, and it's been used by special operators, SportTAC, pro sports teams, and many, many more for years. To learn more and access the best deals of the year, go to newcalm.co/grit. That's Newcalm, NUCALM.co/grit.
Have you gone through patrol tactics for Washington State?
Yeah, I have.
And there's a rubric that they use that have 5 overarching principles on it. In fact,
Yeah.
we kind of, at our organization, we kind of built it differently. But yes, we're using those 5 overarching principles, which is legal authority, communication criteria, threat recognition. Let's see here. There's 2 more. Position and movement and equipment management criteria. So everything that we're starting to do in our in-service training, when we do uh, scenario-based training, we evaluate now. Some people, experts will argue they shouldn't have to be evaluated every time they go through. Well, we can also argue that if we don't evaluate them with critical skills or critical competencies, they're not learning much because they don't know where to correct their behavior from.
Mm.
'Cause each one of those competencies have multiple behaviors and performance data that we want to make sure they meet a minimum standard at. And we haven't done that very well in the past. And that's what we're trying to do through this research project is to see, one, if it works. Two, if it works, how do we go about getting that into the culture of our organization? So when you as a commander or as a leader calls me up and go, hey, we're having a problem with this individual, I'll say, let's break out the rubric. Let's go through the rubric. What performance standards are you looking at? And as soon as they go through that, we'll be able to actually put together a training plan for that individual and their deputy to hopefully move them through, get them back to minimum standard in one of those 5 areas or all of them, whatever that may be. But we definitely need to make sure that whenever we do scenarios, just like on quals for firearms, that we give feedback through an objective process. We get it back. We're able to correct our rounds down range and make sure we get within center mass when we're supposed to. That's the same thing with, cognitive loads or behavior performance.
Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful how you describe that. And just a little shout out to the Patrol Tactics program. Like I've been through a couple iterations over the last few years, and one thing that really sticks out to me when we talk about police training and historic training is the concepts. You literally just read off 5 concepts, and for those outside of the state, if that sounds a little foreign or really intriguing, I highly encourage you to rewind back and take note of what those 5 things are because in my experience, a lot of the teaching of concepts it just helps adult learners so much more because if you think about a high risk scenario, right, something involving sim guns or force options and this and that, to recognize some of those the movement, the shielding, right, the de escalation, the legal authority in that. 20 students could do that scenario 20 different ways and all do really well, right? They might just recognize different points of shielding rather than traditional historic might be well, did they take cover behind this car at this point? It's almost like the checkbox training that Scott Savage and I talk about on and off recording, which is like, did they wristy twisty it this way? And the 10 step process to do this technique. Can you speak kind of a little bit about your experience from your expansive career in training and focusing on concepts rather than the individual little things?
Concepts/competencies, right?
Hmm.
Let's go backwards in time, especially back in the day in the academy where there was, and they still do this, they have closed skills training, which we have to make sure we hit some sort of a checkbox to make sure they do these closed skills correctly, maybe driving, evoc, defensive tactics, on the line, on the range. They have to make sure they get those before we put them into an open concept. So we can grade those 5 overarching principles, 5 concepts, 5 competencies. Because if they're not doing these over here correctly, we're setting them up for failure over here. The idea that we've adopted here at the Spokane County Sheriff's Office is we'll still do our mandated closed skill stuff, right? We're still going to do that. But we want to see how well they're able to put it all together based
Hmm.
on ethics, professionalism, policy, legislation, RCW's wax. How can they get to the same end state? They might do it differently. We're not asking them to do the wristy twisty or the straight arm bar or whatever it is correctly. What we're asking them to do, can you defuse this situation? Can you use that amount of force necessary to defuse it? Can we talk to them in a different way? Absolutely. As long as it meets that minimum standard of those 5 overarching concepts or competencies or principles. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and that really starts to illustrate how you integrate that, right? You learn the specific skills and you put it into scenarios where that is like real life. I mean, you could have a scenario where someone could talk their way through it potentially, right? And get a really good outcome based on all those principles and concepts, and someone else might use lawful legal force after trying something different, right? It might evolve a different way. And that's what I hope that people can grasp is that there's different ways to approach training and evaluating. Like with that, can you speak to some of the specificity and like how we measure? Because you had a recent post, and the time we're recording is early February, so it might be a couple months back from when people are listening. But you had a post about different trainers, or this illustration of different trainers evaluating the same student and potentially getting very different outcomes. And I think
Yes.
a lot of people can raise a flag in their own brains of what could cause that, or what that could actually cause in consequence.
Yes, Eric, we're all human. And I don't expect any of our evaluators to rate perfectly the same. But we just went through a process of training our instructors. It was about 20 hours of training over time using the rubric. First of all, make sure they got the buy-in in the rubric, make sure we want to correct any edits they feel is necessary to get that buy-in. As soon as we got their buy-in, we started recognizing that out of the 70 some odd individuals that we actually trained at, it started coming together and started seeing that minimum standard means this within that box, within that criteria. Above standard means this, and don't go outside of that. Don't try to stay away from your biases. Try to stay away from, what you've always done. We want to evaluate them here. Why? Because those competencies come from a job task analysis that was completed for us in 2023. And it leads into the state mandate patrol tactics, the legislation. So we have two things that are the foundation of the five overarching competencies, which is that human rating that deputy based on our job task analysis, legislative mandate, and what our desired outcome is in the field. And if we start getting those two different rating systems, we have to recalibrate our instructors to make sure we can at least come together somewhat. Now, here's a reality. If one rater out of the 5 competencies, they graded 4 and they hit 1 above, and the next rater came in and said, okay, I see all 4 just in minimum standard. We're close. But if I have one saying they don't meet it versus they really meet it, there's that gap that we have to close. So we all know that humans are going to be humans. We're not perfect. And sometimes a lot of times our bias comes into it and we're fighting that monster of the bias to rate our peers in our own organization. So for me, that training did a few things. Now that we have this research project in front of us, we can tell the researchers, which we've been doing, we've trained all of our instructors, our supervisors from lieutenant down on how to use this evaluation tool. Our expectation is to take some of the variables of behavior out from the evaluation so that way we can give as much objectivity, as much feedback to that student as we possibly can, that deputy, so that they're not going out going, hey, Sergeant so-and-so gave me this feedback, but Tony gave me this feedback. It's
Mm,
the same damn scenario.
mm-hmm.
We don't want that. We want to make sure we come into where they can actually critically think going, I can see his side and I can see his side. And we both rated similar, but not perfectly overlaying the same.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it should be consistent. We should have a
Correct.
consistent expectations.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but talking about evaluating beyond the scenarios, are you talking about evaluation on how we're implementing that training?
Again, we got to go back in history and ask ourselves, where's the research showing that our BLIA is working? And I'm saying post BLIA,
Mhm.
whatever state that is. And after you look at all that, there's not much research out there showing that when we train at the basic academy is effective enough and they're using it post academy. Secondly, is our FTO program working? Well, I would assume ours is because what we're doing through the training process with our FTOs and also our newbies, we're seeing some really good outcomes following that. Was that the academy or is it the FTO program or both? And then last, you got the in-service training. And you put all 3 of those together and you get that individual deputy out in the field. The question is, how are we going to evaluate that behavior change? And that has been on my mind for 20 years, Eric, is
Mhm.
it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of resources. It takes some risk that will DOJ and BJA actually take that risk and give us money to do it? Well, this time they did. Why? I think it has to do with the software that comes along with it. They want to know how well we're using body worn cameras. How are we evaluating our training using the body worn cameras and bringing that information back to change that training to make it a better environment for the deputies so they can go home at night, and also a better environment for our communities, right? That's where we ultimately want to be. But that level 3, level 4 behavior change evaluation, I would say in our state, there's probably 5 or 6 agencies that probably will be able to afford to do it if they
Hmm.
didn't have a grant. Rest of them are small enough to where they're going to go, okay, we can't do that. We we can't get near it. So we're going to trust in Spokane County Sheriff's Office to give us that data that if we follow these formulas, we can improve our training. And that's our goal with that. Is when you ask the question, that post assessment of behavior change. The goal is, yeah, if you're talking about cultural change, the goal is to have those supervisors go out and actually start doing when they can, when they have that opportunity, when they have that time to observe. We just had that in, in service training. That's exactly what we were trained at. Perfect. Or do you remember what we were trained at in service? Let's go back to that. Let's take 5 minutes to talk about it. Let's see that on the next call. That's where we would like to be. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So since you brought it up, and I don't forget, when you say people reach out to Spokane County and get access to that, what does that look like?
As soon as we start getting data in, those reports will be ready to go, right? So we're hoping at our first report, and I'm only taking a stab at this because we're just getting started because of the first government closure. We got our funds and we couldn't really do anything with it for about 4 months. Is when we start getting those reports coming back to me and also the sheriff and the exec staff, we start making those changes. We can start, writing papers on here's how we did this, here's the data we received, and we can start handing that information over to, WASPIC or CJTC, because some of the data might come back are newbies, Crim Law, Crim Pro. In fact, you probably may have same questions internally in your organization. I don't know, but Crim Law, Crim Pro is one of those areas that we got 62, 64% of our agency is less than 2 years.
Hmm.
You can imagine you got these great deputies out there who've been online for a long time. Now we got deputies out there, 62, 64% of them with less than 2 years. How do we go about taking that information and start coaching them faster? They might say they're still not getting the Crim Law Crim Pro. They were tested in the academy. They were tested at our pre and post academy. They're still not grasping that. How do we take that data back to the state and go, by the way, can we look at your curriculum and see this just to make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward? I mean, that's one of the ways we can look at it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the, I think you could say $1 million questions right now, or you could say multi-million-dollar questions, because the risk and impact of not being aggressive about training and developing our young workforce is and can be catastrophic. It can be beyond millions of dollars. It's human lives, but also millions of dollars if we do it wrong.
Yes, correct. I can't say it any better, Eric. That's one of the things we're concentrating on here is how do we change that training to impact our internal culture to help impact the external community trust. You know, we can say it easily, but it's a very hard path, and you have to be dedicated to it to make that happen.
Yeah, and to break the mood a little bit, because that is that might sound really somber and imposing. It's the little things, and that'll bring us into our next chunk of the conversation. It's the little things like building a culture of mentorship, where the 4 or 5 year officers are actively mentoring the 2 to 3 year officers, and it's not because someone tasked them; it's because they recognize, hey, I don't know a ton, I don't know as much as the 10 year sergeant, but I know a lot. I know a lot more than this 1 and 2 year officer. And it's the 1 or 2 year officer pulling aside the student in field training or PTO saying, hey, how are things? Hey, how'd that call go? Oh yeah, I gummed up one of those big time. This has helped me, right? So it's that continual culture of mentorship. And even on the training, I think this is silly, but also highly effective. Currently at my department, the department put up like a lot of case law little tidbits in the urinals, right? Like, or above the urinal. So you're standing there relieving yourself, but you're also getting a review on what reasonable suspicion is. All these prongs of lawful authority, right? Legal authority. And these are the things that it's great to read the exact verbiage, even 18, 19 years in. But also, I can really recognize that this would have been so helpful for me to read on the daily, a couple weeks at a time as a new officer, because you recite in academy and you think you can kind of articulate it later. But man, these are really, really critical foundational pieces.
In today's world of policing, especially in Washington State, Eric, yes. I'm learning, through time that there's a handful of our deputies are still uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but
Yeah.
because of Washington State and the laws. So we have to do a better job as a training agency or a training department within the agency to do exactly what you just said. How do we go about, I love it having that posted above our urinal. How do we go about getting this information to our deputies? They're busy enough. They got work, they got families, they got specialties. They have to worry about all these. And now we're giving them training to help them feel more comfortable making decisions. How do we go about doing that? That's what we're looking at. What's the best way? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the company ArmorLink. We have
Hmm.
that company on board with us for other stuff, but they have a learning management system, right? How do we go about using this as daily training bulletins or micro training to do exactly what you just said? Is it's right in front of you. Let's read about it a little bit. It takes me 5 minutes. Okay, take a 3-question test. Not a gotcha, but just to refresh you on
Hmm.
what's out there, right? And also it'll help out with roll call training. How can we get the lieutenant or the sergeant to bring out roll call training, yet we have a document? They should pull up the micro training and go, let's discuss this. All of us can take the test at the same time. Let's get you more comfortable in your decision making. And mind you, I don't do the work these guys do. The men and women on the street that you and I know of,
Hmm.
they do some tremendous work. So the question is,
Yes.
how do we get them to training? How do we answer the why on how, right? How do we go about doing that in the shortest amount of time? We don't have much money. The funding is short, yet still get the training out to our troops and making sure that it sticks and helps them feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, and that's another stark example of, or very clear example of baking that into your culture. And I love how you even
Yes.
brought up roll call. Like that's great that there's software or different programs and platforms that can create this small dose training, but also you can put a sign up in the locker room. Also, your sergeants can task officers with looking at new case law, and they can be debriefing a call from last night, and then they can actually talk through what some of the legal authority prongs were for everyone that wasn't on the call and even those that were on it, right? So it's continuing to build that culture. Um, we've covered a ton of ground. I do want to ask you a little bit about, from your experience, like what makes a great trainer and kind of shooting from the hip, like what are some of the characteristics and traits? Because that goes beyond being an official instructor or a field training officer, but also a supervisor, also the informal leader that's trying to take people under their wing.
A great trainer, and I'm going off the cuff. They're not a performer. They're a
Mm,
coach, right? They're an individual who is humble within their own emotional intelligence. They're willing to say, I was wrong. Let me teach you why I was wrong. They're an individual they're willing to sit down with a brand new deputy and say, look, you did make a mistake. Nobody got hurt. Everything's okay. Drop the ego. Let's talk about it. So I think the reality is, and I'll go with the last one is, instead of humiliating others through that process, concentrate on the performance, not the individual, right? In a classroom setting, as a leader who's coaching on a 24/7 basis, there's a time and a place, right? But when we're trying to teach newbie or even a more mature deputy, humiliating them is not the route to go, right? But coaching them with a very clear, humble outcome. I'm talking to you because of this, or I'm teaching this because of this, and I've done these mistakes, and help everybody recognize it. I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. I've done some really bad mistakes. In fact, go look at my file. Here it is. Let's talk
mhm,
reality about that. A good trainer is somebody who understands the difference between lecture based and reality based and problem based. How do we blend those in order to help those individuals retain that information that they need to feel comfortable with going out in the field? All too often, we get these great vendors coming in. Their material's great, but first thing I hear is, I need more coffee. I'm about to go to sleep. Good
mm,
material,
mhm.
but I'm about to go to sleep. That
Yeah.
tells me that they're getting good material, but they're not engaging in that practical side to help them retain it going out the door. They're not the infomercial that they're supposed to be. They're the coach to coach them through the processes and systems. So, yeah, that's where I'm at as a, where should we be as an instructor and how should we keep moving forward is don't ever think that you stopped learning. As soon as you stop learning, you stop being a great trainer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the coach aspect. We're coming full circle. It's not humiliating. It's not shoving that kid down the hill without training wheels and without any protective gear. It's to come alongside, right? You talked about lowering the ego and yeah, that humility, kind of what you ended with, being the consummate student. I think some of the best teachers are they fully recognize that they're always learning. They don't know it all. They'll never know it all because it's a moving target. And that's kind of the goal is like recognize and lean into that space of continual learning so that you can be your best and help others be their best.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, I loved it. Well, I love this conversation, Tony. I feel like a lot of people that are into this will probably have to listen to it through again because you gave so many important concepts, especially at the beginning, just kind of breaking it down, and we covered uh, a good amount of it. But there's certainly a lot more we could peel back. Could you please tell the listeners where they can reach out to get in contact with you, pick your brain more, and or anything you want to close with?
Sure. You guys contact me. Go on our website at the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. I'm there. My phone number, my desk number is 509. Let me see if I remember that 477-3557. I look forward to your calls. If you have any questions, I'll be there for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Eric. Call me anytime, brother.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.